The wind rattled the tin roof like it was trying to shake the loneliness out of it. Inside the small, creaking cabin nestled in the woods of northern Montana, Jack Carter sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at a chipped coffee mug that hadn't held coffee in 3 days. It didn't matter. Nothing had tasted like anything since he got home. The clock on the wall ticked. Tick, 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 like footsteps of something creeping closer, but never arriving. Jack rubbed the side of his temple, his fingers brushing a scar above his brow. 12 years in the Army, 3 deployments, 2 Purple Hearts, and a laundry list of things he'd give anything to forget. But memory isn't a switch. It's a trap. One you walk into with your eyes open, day after day. Outside, the trees rustled. The forest was always alive, always moving, even when everything inside Jack felt dead. He got up, limping slightly as he reached for the old army jacket hanging on a nail near the door. It was frayed, worn thin in places, but it was his skin now. He didn't feel right without it. He stepped into the cold without thinking. The sky was overcast, the kind of gray that made the world feel heavier. Jack walked into the woods, boots crunching against damp leaves. This was how he managed. 1 foot after the other. No people. No questions. Just trees. Then he heard it. A sound so small, it barely rose above the wind. A whimper. He stopped. It came again. Softer now. Broken. Jack's instincts flared. It was the sound of pain, the kind that doesn't expect anyone to come. He pushed through a thick tangle of brush, ducked beneath a low-hanging branch, and followed the sound down an incline slick with moss. That's when he saw it, a bundle of brown and black fur half hidden behind a fallen log. A German shepherd. Large, strong-looking, or it had been once. Now it was barely moving. Its back leg was twisted unnaturally, pinned in an old rusted animal trap. Blood caked the fur around the wound, and its breathing was shallow. One eye fluttered open as Jack approached, and the dog let out a growl, weak, but full of fear. Jack crouched slowly. "Hey," he said softly, voice cracking from disuse. "It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." The dog didn't relax, but it didn't lunge either. That was a start. He took off his jacket and laid it down in front of him, inching closer. "I know that look," he whispered. "I've had that look." He'd seen it in mirrors. In bunkmates. In men lying on stretchers waiting for the morphine to kick in. Jack reached for the trap, and the shepherd let out a warning bark, but it was more bark than bite. The energy just wasn't there. "I need to get this off you," Jack said, more to himself than the dog. "You're not dying out here. Not like this." With practiced fingers, he pried open the trap. The dog yelped, loud and sharp, but didn't snap. It simply collapsed into the dirt, exhausted. Jack didn't hesitate. He wrapped the dog in his jacket, slid his arms beneath its body, and stood, pain shooting up his leg, the old shrapnel injury screaming in protest. But he held firm. The walk back felt longer than it should have. His arms burned. His breath came hard. But the weight in his arms was grounding. Inside the cabin, Jack laid the dog on the floor beside the fireplace. He lit a fire, wrapped it in a blanket, and began cleaning the wound with old first aid supplies he hadn't touched since the army shipped him home. The shepherd didn't make a sound as Jack stitched the torn flesh. Just watched him. Those eyes, intelligent. Haunted. Too familiar. "Yeah," Jack said, wiping his brow. "I get it." He didn't sleep that night. He sat on the floor next to the dog, watching the firelight dance in its eyes, listening to its breathing rise and fall. It was the first time he hadn't had a nightmare in months. The next morning, Jack opened a can of soup, poured it into a bowl, and placed it near the dog's snout. It sniffed, didn't move. Then slowly it licked at the broth. Progress. Days passed. Jack didn't leave the cabin. He didn't want to. For once, something needed him. Something was here with him, not asking questions, not trying to fix him. Just being. He started talking to the dog. At first, just mumbling. Weather reports. Complaints about his leg. Then stories. Real ones. Stuff he hadn't said out loud in years. He told the shepherd about Ramirez, the squad joker who didn't make it out of Kabul. About Sarah, his ex-wife, who told him after 2 tours she couldn't live with a ghost. About the VA therapist he stopped seeing after 3 sessions because the guy looked at him like he was broken glass. The dog didn't judge. Didn't flinch. Just listened. That was enough. One night, Jack stood at the door, looking out at the moonlit forest. He felt something brush against his leg. He looked down. The dog had walked to him. On 3 legs. Its injured legs still too weak to bear weight, but it had come anyway. Jack looked into its eyes and something cracked. His throat tightened. His chest trembled. He dropped to his knees, wrapped his arms around the shepherd, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Jack Carter cried. The first time the dog barked, Jack nearly dropped his coffee. It was 3 days after the stitches. Jack had just stepped outside to grab more firewood when the sharp bark echoed from inside the cabin. Not a bark of pain or fear, a bark of presence, of life. He turned, saw the dog sitting up, still favoring its wounded leg, but alert, watching him through the doorway. "Well, look at you," Jack muttered, eyebrows rising. "Didn't think you'd have anything to say." The shepherd tilted its head slightly as if amused. That night, Jack finally gave the dog a name. "Shadow," he said as he spooned some scrambled eggs into a bowl. "Always behind me, just quiet enough to forget, until I realize I can't do this without you." The dog gave no reply, of course. Just watched him, golden eyes gleaming in the firelight. Jack wasn't sure where the name came from. Maybe from the way Shadow moved, silent, always lurking just out of reach, or maybe because the dog reminded him of the parts of himself he couldn't escape. The shadows of war, of loss. But unlike his own, this one felt safe. In the mornings, Jack began rising earlier than usual, sometimes before the sun. He'd shuffle to the porch with his coffee, and soon enough, Shadow would hobble out beside him and sit. Neither said anything. But the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was shared. Jack found himself speaking more. Telling stories. Not for anyone else, for Shadow. About his old team, the times they laughed so hard in the barracks they cried. About the one time he broke his nose during a surprise snowball ambush in Kandahar. About his little sister Emily, who still sent him Christmas cards even when he didn't reply. Shadow would lay his head on Jack's boot and close his eyes as if listening. And Jack felt heard. The forest walks returned slowly. At first, Jack carried Shadow part of the way, then set him down to limp along beside him. But every day the dog got stronger. And so did Jack. One morning, as the snow began to melt and spring hinted on the horizon, they walked together. No limp, no carry. Just 2 shapes moving between the trees. Jack had taken one of his old rucksacks and retrofitted it into a carry pouch for Shadow's supplies. He'd carved a wooden name tag, Shadow, if found, returned to Jack, and tied it around the dog's collar with an old bootlace. At night, Jack began teaching Shadow hand signals, silent cues, the kind he used to use with military dogs. Shadow picked them up quickly. Too quickly. As if he'd been trained before. Jack made a note to check for a chip later. But something in the back of his mind whispered, "He's like you." Someone discarded. Someone who had a job, a team, a war, and then nothing. A storm rolled in a few nights later. Thunder cracked over the forest, lightning split the sky, and the wind howled through the eaves like a screaming memory. Jack shot upright in bed, heart racing, mind yanked into a place halfway across the world. Mortars. Shouting. Fire. A flash of Ramirez's face. Gone. His breath came fast, shallow. He stumbled to the wall, hand on the wood like it was a bunker. The panic clawed at him like it always did. And then, he felt a nudge. Grounding. Shut up. The dog pressed against his leg, eyes locked on his. Jack dropped to the floor, curled his hands into Shadow's fur, his breath slowing in time with the dog's steady presence. Not a word was spoken. None were needed. That night, Jack slept. A few days later, he sat at the cabin table sorting through unopened mail. Most of it was junk, ads, late notices, one birthday card from Emily postmarked 6 weeks earlier. Then he saw the VA envelope. He almost tossed it. But then he looked at Shadow. He opened it. Inside was a simple letter. A reminder about a group therapy session starting up in town. Tuesdays. Veterans only. Coffee and donuts. No pressure. Jack scoffed. He hadn't set foot in that building in over a year. The last time, the counselor had asked him to explain his feelings. Jack nearly walked out through a window. But the idea didn't feel as ridiculous as it once did. Not with Shadow around. Not now. He set the letter down, turned to Shadow. What do you think? You and me crashing a support group? Scare some people? Shadow thumped his tail once. Jack laughed. A real, genuine laugh. That evening, as the fire crackled and the woods grew quiet again, Jack leaned back in his chair, watching the flames flicker. He reached down and scratched behind Shadow's ears. You saved me, you know, he said softly. I thought I was done. I didn't want to feel anything again. But then, there you were. Shadow looked up at him with those deep, soulful eyes. Two broken souls, patched together by chance. Or fate. Or something bigger. For the first time in years, Jack believed in something again. Maybe tomorrow, they'd try town. Maybe not. But they'd face it together. It was a Thursday morning when Jack walked into town for the first time in months. Shadow trotted at his side, confident now, his stride